Okay, and welcome back everybody. So for this video, we're going to now focus on augmented six chords in context now that we've seen them in 4 parts. So I've got this handout that I will of course upload when I'm done with it. It's 2 pages long of examples of augmented six chords in actual pieces of music. So we'll start with this Beethoven example, which I'm going to play for you. I'll play each of them, but I will also link to professional recordings of them too. So here's this Beethoven Piano Sonata in C minor. Let's do it again. So we get one right away at the beginning of this sonata. And I'm going to mark up the score a bit. Okay, I'm going to add the key right here. And we can say that it starts with a 1 chord. I think sometimes people find it confusing to know, like, well, which of these notes am I supposed to take into account here? Like this leading tone, I'm not going to worry about trying to put a chord under that. And the F that comes here, I'm not going to worry about trying to put a chord under that. We can't really say very much about what's happening harmonically because there are 2 voices and they've been in unison this whole time. Maybe 1/6, maybe not. I probably wouldn't even change the chord this entire time. I would just say 1. Here's where we finally get a full chord. I wouldn't take all of these into account either. So in this case, I would probably simply take these first pitches in the chord and the C of the right hand. And that means that I've got scale degree 1. I've got F sharp, which is raised 4. I've got 1 doubled here in this kind of tenor voice or whatever. And then I've got an A flat in the bass. So I've got 1, sharp 4, 1 again, and flat 6, flat already because it's in the key signature. If it has those ingredients, that means that this one is an Italian augmented 6. Listen again to how that resolves. Goes directly to 5 like it is supposed to. Remember that that is the typical thing that they do. And this is only 4 bars. That might be half cadence. I don't know because I don't know what comes next. And that's how that one works. I'm going to go on to Saint-Saëns. Again, you can pause it and go listen to a professional orchestrated recording of it if you want. I'm going to play what the piano reduction is here. Absolutely love this movement of Carnival of the Animals. I love water and aquariums anyway, so that's probably part of it. But I love that orchestration with the very high parts up here. So here we have an augmented 6 chord not exactly behaving the way that it should. It's not a classical era piece, right? This is a little bit later, so that's part of why. We do start with a 1 chord. Let's say that it's A minor, although there's clearly mixture and chromatic stuff going on. So what do we have then on the next beat? We've got A is 1. Here's our lowered 6. B, as in Bravo, is 2. And D, as in Delta, is sharp 4, the way that it's spelled there, which means we've got 1, lowered 6, sharp 4, and 2. 2, of course, points you in a particular direction. Maybe you're already screaming it at the camera now, that this is a French augmented 6 chord. French because of the presence of that second scale degree here. I'll just circle it so that you can refer to that. So that is what separates that one from the Italian. If you go back and look at the first one, we only had 3 different pitches here. Now we have 4 different pitches, including scale degree 2. So it alternates between those 2 chords, right, until eventually we get a 4 chord there. So let me just flesh this out. So we're kind of going back and forth. For example, really there's an A pedal that's happening. So in a way, like all of this is sort of happening in a cloud above the A pedal. And instead of minor 4, we get a little mode mixture here. Mode mixture, you might recall, is when we have a major 4 in a minor key, for example. Just draw your attention to it there. That's a major 4. Something that we would normally only see in a major key. So the same thing happens, and then instead of minor 4, we end with major 4. And so in this case, the French augmented 6 chord is not going to 5 like it is supposed to. That's why I say it's kind of an unusual example, but it's so beautiful. That's why I decided to include it. And also, I wanted you to see this French chord. Now let's look at this Schubert example. And again, I'm linking to a recording with the full performance, with a singer. But for right now, I'll just play the piano part because actually our special chord here happens right at the beginning. We don't even need to get into the actual song of Amir. And in this electric piano, it's particularly muddy. Let me see what happens if I play it up an octave. A little bit easier to hear those parts. Okay, so in that case, we start with what looks like an augmented chord and we just go directly back to 1, right? So let's look at this piece in more detail here. We're in C major, major key. So we've got 1, we've got flat 6. Circle that one for you. We've got sharp 2. And if I move that down a little, we've got raised 4. So we've got all the ingredients of, it almost looks like French, but 2 is raised. There's a joke about this particular one, actually. This is sometimes called, I may make this on the other video too, this is sometimes called the Swiss augmented 6 chord because it looks French but sounds German, which is not even a very good joke, but that is I'll tell you all the music theory jokes I know, and most of them are bad. So it looks French in that it has 2 in it, but 2 is raised. It will sound German because flat 3 and sharp 2 sound the same. For instance, so we call this the Swiss. You can also just label it German, that's fine. I'll just note below it, that this is the Swiss spelling. I don't know why it's like that. There we go. And by Swiss spelling, I mean specifically that it is sharp 2 instead of flat 3. but it is the same chord in terms of which scale degrees are involved, or in terms of which like actual pitches are involved. And this one also does not resolve to 5 like it's supposed to. So you can see that these chords don't always do what you think, and they show up so much in this romantic repertoire, kind of doing their own thing. Here's the same chord again, and then downbeat of bar 2. It's so dissonant, it's harder to hear in that register, in this piano in particular. So here's the German augmented 6 again, and it goes to 1 again, not like it's supposed to. But it has 1 in it, so it has that tone in common, and that allows it to get there pretty easily. And that's the story with that Schubert example. Next, we have this example from Chopin, and it is from, you might know this prelude. It starts like that. I'll link to the whole thing. It's very short. You can listen to all of it if you'd like to. It's very beautiful and famous, so you might know it already. But this is starting in measure 19 to the end. Just achingly sad. So, like the piece title says, we're in E minor. Let's go ahead and work through some of this one and not just do the augmented chord. So it looks like we're supposed to go from a cadential 6/4 to what would just be a 5 chord, but instead it moves kind of deceptively first. So we have a 5/6/4 that does not do what it ought to. Instead, it moves deceptively to an A minor chord, and A would be 4, so we have a 4/6 chord, and then back. Oops. Back to the same thing here, and then it actually this time does do what it's supposed to. About like that. I need one more of those. More so. And then it does turn into a 5/7 chord right about there. So it's like we have a cadential 6/4 chord, it doesn't resolve properly. We try again, this time it does resolve properly to 5, but instead then it goes to 6. I love a deceptive cadence in a minor key going to that major 6 chord. It just sounds so awesome. And then this turns into a C major minor 7th chord in the key of E minor. To me, that looks like if it's a C major minor 7th chord, that means that C is 5 of something, and C is 5 of F, and that makes this 5/7 of, it's really 5/7 of the Neapolitan that does not go to the Neapolitan. Come on now. There. Haha. This is our 5/7 of the Neapolitan. It does not go to the Neapolitan. Instead, it goes to 2 diminished 6. Oh, dang. Okay. So that goes to 2 diminished 6. Preview is having a meltdown. And so then on the next line, we're making a very, very long way again toward a cadential 6/4. And we've got what looks like the beginning of one, where instead of just 6/4 like this. We're going to go 7 to 6 on the first kind of 2 beats. And then alongside that, we'll also have a 4 because the 4 is present that whole time. So I'll sort of space it like that. I guess here I ought to say sharp 6, and then that becomes just a regular 6/4 about there. All of that being 5, followed by this chord. This is our special augmented friend, right? So what do we have here? We have 1, we have flat 3, which is naturally going to be in the key signature in a minor key. We have 6, which is C, and here we have B flat in the bass, and B flat is scale degree, flat 5, but if you think about it, that's enharmonically the same as sharp 4. Part of the reason I picked some of these examples is because they show you how this actually works in real music, when perhaps because of a spelling convention, the composer may choose to use an enharmonic spelling. It's just easier to look at this chord and know how you would play it, even though that obscures maybe the fact that it is an augmented 6 chord. So if it's 1 flat 3 sharp 4 spelled as flat 5 and 6, that means that this is our German augmented 6 chord. And when the sharp 4, or in this case spelled as flat 5, is in the bass, then we actually call it the German 7. I know that that's confusing. The spelling in this one is particularly strange, but I want you to know that that's something that you may encounter in actual music. Followed by something a little more familiar, what looks like a cadential chord, except for it only has, it's just a 5 chord with a 4/3 suspension on it, and the 4/3 takes this whole time. So let me line them up here. It doesn't even have a 7th on it, just a 5 with a 4/3 suspension going over here to 1. So that one's a little thornier. It's okay if this part is a little confusing to you. It's very strange. That's not something that you see very often, but Chopin is great at what we would call this kind of like linear voice leading or parsimonious voice leading. I'll write that over here for you. It just means that these voices move by step as much as possible, and like a suspension, just moving by step in very small increments. They're leapt up, I guess, but most of the time it's just moving by step, and that means that it's like ultra smooth voice leading. And the last example I have for you is going to be separate in the annotation packet, but it is altogether in your Word document version of this. It's this example from the Elgar Enigma variations, and I'm going to, again, link to it, but I want to play this part for you here so that we can talk about it. Etc. You might recognize the Enigma variations. It's very beautiful. I highly recommend that you listen to the whole thing. This is apparently from the second minor movement. This is so sad to hear the Enigma variations being sad. standard stuff so far. Hopefully that starts to stick out to you. If you see examples of, or if you see accidentals, it could mean a couple of things. It could mean modulation or tonicization. It could mean a 5 or 7 of something is happening. And now it could also mean that there's an augmented 6 chord happening. So the C sharp, I hope, is a giveaway, especially when you realize that that is raised 4, scale degree raised 4, 1, flat 3, and flat 6. You might be listening to that and thinking, that sounds like a major minor 7th chord or a dominant 7th chord. Hold that thought for a couple weeks. You can tell from the way it resolves and the way that it's spelled, however, that it is an augmented 6 chord. So I'm going to mark this up a little bit. Let's just do a little analysis for practice actually from the beginning. So here's G minor is the key that we're in. We start with 1. Looks like we've got D, A, C, F sharp, D, F sharp, A, and C in the key of G minor. Oops. Is a 5-7 chord, but what inversion is it in? If the 5th is in the bass, that means it is a 4-3 chord. Move those over there like that. Moving to 1-6, which is actually pretty normal, right? To have this progression. Notice how it steps up in the bass. Do, re, mi, fa, right here. And that does look like a 4 chord, oops, but also it has a 7th on it there. And then that looks like it's going to go to a cadential 6-4, but also resolves deceptively. Instead, we go to A, C, E flat, and G, which would be a 2 half diminished chord, but in this case, A, C, and E flat is in the bass. That means that the 5th of the chord is in the bass. And so that is a 2. Bear with it while it figures this out. There we go. 2 half diminished 4-3 chord as well. So that should look about like that. If you called this a passing 6-4, I think that would also make sense. I think that's also okay. Okay, 2 half diminished 4-3. And then we get G, F, and B. You have to intuit that G, B, D is missing an F. That would make that 5 of something, or rather 5, 6, 5 of something. Oops, looks like I made it say 6, 6. Haha. So there's 5, 6, 5, and that means that in what key is G major 5? G major is 5 in C major, or C minor, and that would be 4, and that's what comes next. So I'm going to write that over here. I wanted to point out this notation to you. Most of you use the slash notation in your homework. That's fine, but it's also possible to use this arrow notation, and that also means of 4. Here, let me move them a little bit more to the same plane here. 5, 6, 5 of 4. That's okay. Okay, I circled this one that I said is our special augmented 6 chord of the week. Notice we've got 1, flat 3, flat 6. If flat 3 is involved, you already know that it's a German chord, but notice that F sharp, or not F sharp, C sharp, sharp 4 is in the bass, which makes that one a German 7 instead of a German augmented 6. And that is the sort of special thing about this example too. So now you've seen that a couple times this way and in the Chopin. I think I would probably call the next one a passing 6/4 as well, since we've already had one, and because it's doing that same thing, stepping up to a minor 4 chord. If you call it minor 4/6/5 because of what's going on here, I will accept that. I think that would be okay. And then that steps down to a root position 4 chord. Oops, I forgot to add the inversion here. Steps down to a root position 4 chord. And then I'm going to treat the A here as a passing tone as well. I'm circling them to show that I know that they're there, but I'm not putting it into my analysis. If you included it in the chord, it would just make the chord a 2 half diminished 6/5. That's also okay. There's times when it's not super clear which of those it is, and that's allowed. So then finally to 1, major 1, mode mixture happening again. These romantic composers, they love their mode mixture. They love it at cadences. You already know, the Picardy third is an example of mode mixture, for example. I think that's a familiar one to you. Okay, and so there's that Elgar example. And that's all we're going to do with augmented 6 chords alone. And I'll be back next week with more chromatic harmony. Bye for now.